hunting, trapping, harvesting is just a huge integral part of Inuit culture, and there is a whole history that has occurred in Nunavut for Inuit that has disenfranchised them from being able to do that. So the plan is it's a strategy for larger poverty reduction, really supporting Inuit and communities to have their own sovereignty and efficacy around the decisions that are made for their communities.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back. Welcome back to our podcast, The Zero Hunger Project. I'm your host, Suman Roy.
I'm Stacey O'Neill.
And today we're going to talk about Northern resilience, poverty, food security, and community in Nunavut. And who do we have today to talk about this?
I'm very pleased to welcome Blair Williams to our podcast this afternoon. Blair is the Director of Poverty Reduction in the Department of Family Services for the Government of Nunavut. In this role, Blair oversees strategic coordination of programs and partnerships aiming to address poverty, food security, homelessness, and support for nonprofit capacity building throughout the territory. The Poverty Reduction Division facilitates collaboration among government departments, Inuit organizations, and community groups to implement initiatives under the Makimaniq Poverty Reduction Plan, working towards strengthened local economies, increased food security, and more supportive systems of income assistance. Blair brings a community-driven leadership style to these efforts, prioritizing policies and actions that reflect the lived realities of the Nunavut. Okay, you're going to have to help me again, Blair. Tell me this word.
Nunavut.
Nunavut, which I really love, but it doesn't trip off my tongue because I haven't had.
Sorry, can you tell me a little bit more about this word?
Well, I mean, Blair can tell you, but a Nunavut is a person who lives in Nunavut,
That's right.
which is cool.
Very cool.
I did not know that. It's a great word. Welcome, Blair. Welcome.
Well, thank you for having me. Very
thank
kind introduction.
So, Blair, now, what are the most, according to you, what are the most pressing food security challenges that's facing Nunavut right now, especially in the remote communities?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it's very important to put that question into the context in terms of Nunavut. And when you ask about remote communities, there's 25 communities around Nunavut, and you could describe every single one of them as being remote. So you're talking to me, I'm in Inuit-led, which is the capital of Nunavut. And even here, we're fly in, fly out only. So, for example, if I was to travel south, there's a lot of Canadians that ask me, how long does it take to drive? And you can't. So
That's how long it takes. It takes forever.
That's right. And in that remoteness, there's a number of issues that are very unique to Nunavut in terms of food transportability, food storage, food accessibility, affordability is off the chart. And so if we took all of those measures around food, is it available, is it accessible, is it affordable, and is it quality, you could safely say that right across the territory, all of those things are compromised, either at certain points of the year or all of the time. So we have between 60 and 80% of households experiencing some kind of food insecurity at any one time.
60 to 80% of all households are experiencing some kind of food insecurity.
That's right. And that could be from, mild. It could be that you go to the store and there just may not be something available because it hasn't been able to come in. Or it could be severe, where families are in dire need of food and will not be certain about what they're going to eat over the next few days. So it's actually the highest documented prevalence of food insecurity for any Indigenous population living in a developed country. And people, I don't think, are quite acutely aware of that, being that here we are in Canada.
No, exactly. I'm going to repeat this once again for our audience because our audience is global.
Mm,
And when they think about Canada, they certainly think it's a rich country, it's a developed country. But territory in Canada,
mm.
60 to 80% of the population have some sort of food insecurity.
That's right.
Wow,
Mm.
this is an eye opener.
And we also have 30% higher food costs than anywhere in Canada. Um, we have a housing situation where um, one example would be a house fire just a few months ago, a 3-bedroom house that displaced around 20 people. So there's an overcrowding here, which has a direct effect for food security too.
We've talked a lot about how homelessness and food security are sort of food insecurity rather are inexorably linked, and that is
Mm.
a really sort of visceral explanation of that. I hear things like this, and I'm constantly reminded how badly we as a country have let down our Indigenous
100%.
and First Nations populations. For
Yes.
100%.
yeah,
Mm.
it's really shameful and it's really shocking.
It is, but I do want to dig in a little bit about the housing issue that you were just talking about.
Mm.
Now, this is one example. I get it, 20 people living in a 3-bedroom house. But overall, with the homelessness or housing, what is the magnitude of the problem there?
Well, we do know that the wait list for public housing is long. The estimate minimum is around 3 to 5 years. And so we have people in transitional housing that are looking to access either public housing or a private rental. And oftentimes there's nothing on the market. So the infrastructure across housing is something that is regularly addressed at the Legislative Assembly. It's something that is known, it's dire, and there's strategic plans along with food security and poverty reduction for housing also. So Nunavut 3000 is sort of a project that um, we we are part of in some of our working groups, but there's certainly a desire by the GN or the Government of Nunavut to really seriously address um, the housing issue that is right across the territory. Um, so when you think about, Stacia, those things you said before about housing and food insecurity going together, just being mindful too that they're that very base of feeling safe and having a space that you're able to literally use as a home plate to do other things from. And for a lot of people across the territory, that might exist in the sense of a friend's couch or um, somebody has a job and you're able to live with them. But these two things go together.
Yeah. And also, we know statistically that there are higher rates of domestic violence, that there are substance abuse issues. There are all kinds of tangential, if you will, situations, problems that come up as a result of lack of, I mean, these are human rights, but lack of food, lack of
Absolutely.
housing, those types of things. It causes a whole bunch of other huge problems, social problems.
Absolutely. And I'm going to jump to this because this is when I hear that, and this is not the first time I'm hearing about the issue of food in the remote communities,
Mm.
the cost of food in the remote communities. Um, just from your experience, can you talk a little bit, Blair, about what kind of solutions that you can think about, maybe policy, provincially, federally, municipally? What are some of the ideas that is coming out of the work that you're doing?
Yeah, it's a great question. There's certainly a lot of advocacy to to the food suppliers as well as transporters regarding sustainable ways of bringing food into the communities. Um, there's been recently Canada North Nutrition was providing money for subsidy on food coming through the grocery stores, so store bought food, and that's still in place, but it's not enough to offset the costs of transportation and storage that push the food prices up. Um, even even with the subsidies, because of the lower rates of income and those other factors of getting store bought food to the territory, the prices are still often outside of the reach um, for someone to be able to go to the grocery store, um, and perhaps spend $150 and walk away with a few meals and a few days worth of food for their family. Um, that's that's going to be costing a lot more, um, right across the communities here. And so we use a measure which you may have heard of called the market basket measure. And so what that is a series of five indicators that are priced according to where we live. And so we've advocated really strongly for the market basket measure to be applied directly to Nunavut rather than being a general Canada-based, you know, basket measure. And so um, that's been really eye-opening, because what it shows is that around 45% of households don't meet the threshold for the market basket measure. So there's a number of people that are having to make choices about if I pay the bills this week, I may not be able to buy food. If I buy food this week, I may not be able to pay my rent. Um, and so there's a lot of subsidies that help, but I don't think they're seen as sustainable.
And they're probably hard to access for some people, right? I mean, it's a really kind of administrative heavy thing to get yourself seen.
Yes, 100%. Probably the most recent example was a food voucher program that was coming through federal funding to the Inuit Child First Initiative, and that allowed families to access um, $500 a month for kids for food.
Hmm.
And that was starting to show a real shift in the needle in terms of school attendance, in terms of
Literacy rates, all kinds of stuff.
crime. You
Yeah,
know,
for
it
sure.
was having, it was beginning, they were beginning to be able to show that this was having a really stabilizing impact and positive impact. And unfortunately, that funding ended in June. And so since then, there was for example, a recent CBC article that highlighted in one of the communities the access to the food kitchen had gone up over 50%, very, very quickly. And so we know that financial, forgivable loans or different things that people can access to help support food security for themselves and their family, we know they work. But in the long term, probably the two biggest measures are how can we increase something like a universal basic income or a living wage, and how can we decrease the cost of living, particularly the rent and food, which are very, extremely high. So those are two really broad goals that require a fairly consistent advocacy on the part of multiple departments. That's not just coming from us.
Totally, Blair. And so this is where I'm trying to understand this a little better. In more urban populations, cities, we talk about food insecurity certainly being a majorly income issue. And of course, living wage and basic income are certainly the solutions. From what I'm hearing from you, that the solutions might be similar even in remote communities. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, there is a another issue which people who are listening may or may not be aware of, that for a lot of the communities in Nunavut, um, they are above the tree line. The land is historically been a lot of permafrost, and so when we think about agriculture or herd farming, those options are just not an option.
Mm.
So the idea of having financial sort of support until such a time that you can get to a point where the community's sustaining itself through some of those mechanisms that you could do in the rural south, they're not options for the communities here. And so we need to be thinking about some of that and emerging tech, like grow domes, solar power, things that can be sustainable through a winter that can, for some of the communities, drop to sort of minus 60, lots of blizzards. And so food storage in those conditions becomes incredibly complex, especially for your nutritious things like fruits and vegetables. It's, you know,
I wanted to ask two questions. First is, uh, could you talk about how hunting and fishing and foraging and that type of thing kind of supplements what the dearth in store bought food, and if there are any barriers to people doing that? That's my first question. The second question is, what do you see nonprofit organizations, Inuit-led, uh, programs and protocols? How do you see them participating in this and getting a seat at the table and having their voices be heard?
yeah, so obviously hunting, trapping, harvesting is just a huge integral part of Inuit culture and ways of being. And there is a whole uh, history that has occurred in Nunavut for Inuit that has disenfranchised them from that being able to do that. And so it's very much something that we want to support. There's a hunters and trappers, network through the territory that we want to be able to continue to support however we can in terms of mentoring, younger people into that part of the culture. Food sharing is a huge piece for Inuit when they're harvesting country food. They're bringing it back to their communities. They're sharing it around. There's some interterritorial sharing across food banks. And so, yeah, that is a piece of the puzzle that has to be driven by Inuit in their various communities, depending on which herds or which stock they have access to. It could be seafood, it could be caribou, it could be a number of different food stuffs that are available. There is an issue with sustainability of that too over time. So I know at the moment for some seasons they'll do ticketed culls, and so only a certain amount of animals can be harvested, and so that can have its limitations for immediate food security. But then over time, it's yeah, it's some of the herds are not large enough to be able to sustain an ongoing hunt.
What is the source of the disenfranchisement in general? What's happening with people? Why is that? How much time do I have, Stace?
Huh. Yeah, it's a huge question, and it's probably the question that uh, people don't ask enough. Um, if we go back very recently to what they call the 60s scoop, we have a number of Inuit that were, traditionally nomadic and able to sustain, for the most part, that lifestyle, who were then placed, and resources like dogs were taken off them. Resources like fur trading were essentially banned. And through a series of essentially colonization events,
Kidnappings.
um, their entire the entirety of their sovereignty was squashed. And my I'm probably the worst. I'm not the right person to talk to. I'm clearly not Inuit. I'm not from this land. But there is a collective. There's absolutely a collective um, history that involves trauma for Inuit that um, continues to have massive impacts today.
It's just such a monumental problem because we're trapped under the history of it. And, and it's incumbent upon settlers to fix this problem because we've now made it Indigenous people's responsibility to make us feel better about their oppression. So that's a problem that needs
Yeah.
to be fixed in addition to everything else. I just wanted to loop back to the other question that I asked you about. This sort of ties in, I feel like, a little bit. What are the nonprofits? How do the nonprofits get involved? How do the Inuit-led social service programs, those types of things, community programs, how do they get to the forefront? How do they get the attention of the decision makers? How do they get invited to the table?
Well, it's really fortunate to have a number of Inuit-led organizations that have MOUs and pledges from the legislation to work together with the government. And it's absolutely pivotal that we're led by them, not the other way around. So we're looking at part of what we are wanting to do through mechanisms like the Poverty Reduction Roundtable, through strategies like Makimaniq. These, are based on Inuit social values. And, when I say that, I'm talking about coming to decisions through consensus, working together for common causes and providing for community and family, respecting, caring for each other. These are the really beautiful, beautiful parts of Indigenous Inuit values that underpin everything that we have to do. And so that means going to communities. It means talking with elders. It means talking to the local initiatives if they're not even at an NGO level yet. That it could just be someone that's seen a community need and has started to act, and we can hopefully support that and help that grow. So Inuit social values are very, very much need to be placed at the forefront of absolutely everything.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
So I would like to know a little bit more about the Makimaniq plan that the government came up with, is what I'm assuming. And how was the process? How did we actually involve the Inuit population? And what does it say in short?
Mm. So the Makimaniq plan is something that began back in around 2012, certainly before my time here, and it's currently sort of legislated to have a 5-year cycle. And so we're just about to, fingers crossed, we'll have Makimaniq 3 by sort of January, February 2026.
Oh,
And really, it's a strategy for larger poverty reduction, and it includes a very definitive stream around increased food security and food sovereignty. And there's there's 8 outcomes altogether which talk to increased community decision making, really supporting Inuit and communities to have their own sort of sovereignty and efficacy around the decisions that are made for their communities. Um, Trying to support the right mix and cost of living, actively supporting healing, whether that from trauma that we talked about. Um, Part of that for any population group, but specifically for Indigenous populations everywhere. There's where there's that trauma history, there's often addictions too. Um, so supporting communities with that, and really looking for opportunities and initiatives to support the local economies. So they're kind of very broad goals, and how we achieve those goals goes back to being informed by the communities themselves. So Makimaniq was sort of this reciprocal consultation, collaboration, um, and these principles came out of that. Um, I
Wow.
hope that's answered the question.
Yeah, no, 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 that totally does. So, sorry, I'm just going to get into that. We talked about earlier the food security challenges in the communities. Um, Food sovereignty, let's talk about that for a few minutes. How is the food sovereignty in the community, and what are the biggest threats in the food sovereignty side of it?
I think that's a community by community uh, issue. There's some communities that have access to, for example, caribou herds or beluga, or um, they're situated in places where certain animals might migrate through, or certain fishing supplies are available. So the ability to access food and utilize that for their purposes, beyond just food. I mean, clothing, fishing line, just all sorts of resources, um, is is quite strong in some communities and not so strong in others. Um, you also have this piece that we talked about earlier, where certain foods are not able to be produced, locally, so that option's off the table. There's also, I think, a high degree of food education and food skills in terms of preparation and harvesting that needs to be learnt, relearnt in some instances. Um, I remember talking to one woman, and she had gone through a number of health issues, and I was a little startled when she said to me, "I did not know that food could hurt me." Right? There was just no sort of link between what was going in and the nutrition and the impact. Um,
That's
and
crushed.
so going back to the sovereignty piece, there's yeah, absolutely, we want to do everything we can to support food sovereignty, but there's certain things that have happened through that colonization process, um, largely, that have taken a huge chunk of that away from Inuit, and it's still there in its intent. It's you can feel it, and you can you know in the stories and in the people who are beautiful, you can hear that desire to be back in a space where they have the capacity for themselves to do what they need.
Wow.
This is one of those conversations that seems like a problem inside of a problem inside of a problem inside of a problem. And I have a lot of admiration for people who are working at this all the time, because it must be daunting and draining and frustrating, and to be culturally respectful and efficient and all of those types of things, to keep going over a long period of time must be very challenging. I would like to know what your best case scenario is. What is, like, pie in the sky, wave a magic wand, pick an expression, best case outcome for you in this particular situation?
I think we've probably touched on it, and
Yep.
my pie in the sky would be that communities have the capacity to be self-sufficient and with their own food sourcing and supply. Like if we're talking specifically about food security,
Mhm.
um, how that happens uh, is the problem inside the problem inside the problem.
Yeah.
But there's certainly, I think, growing solutions that come with technology
Mhm.
um, and education.
Mhm.
Um, I think there is perhaps other ways that we can advocate for lowering overall prices and increasing overall incomes. So these are things that we have to keep pressing. It's a bit like if you did a campaign and you got a whole lot of interest, and you might get a flurry of donations, and that would be great for a couple of months. But these complex issues require a press that probably needs to keep up for, if we talk about a two-generational approach, which um, is something that I would absolutely agree with. Um, and we could say the same for any number of issues, whether that was addictions or abuse, or all of those kind of high tower of complexities within a society need to have a shared press from NGOs, from government departments, from that's led by community.
How can people outside of the community help? How could somebody in Toronto help you? Help them?
I think there's ample opportunities for people to donate to different NGOs, food banks. There's certainly mechanisms where like hunters and trappers can be supported, um, again through donations. I think if anybody is in the political mix and has either been here or has a heart for Indigenous resilience and sovereignty, then there's plenty of scope in there too to be able to do the kind of advocacy and policy work that uh, we're constantly at, right? There's, I actually just found this out yesterday that we have also the highest airfares in, I think, in the world, according to distance travelled. Um, and and that's a pretty big problem.
Yeah. Yeah.
when that is the only option.
Yeah, is so for example, just to get out of Iqaluit, and if you were say going to a first stop port city like Ottawa, um, it's a 3 hour flight, and the airfares are around $1,500, and so for a person or a family, um, that's the people piece. But when you're also bringing materials in, either by boat, which is around 4 months a year only, there's a window until everything freezes over, and then it's up to flights. And so uh, it's, even for building, for example, it's the costs of bringing material in is really exorbitant. It's not as if we can go out the back and cut a tree down and build ourselves a cabin, you know. Um, so I think one of the biggest factors for a lot of issues here is going back to where we started, and that's that sort of low income, high cost of living, um, and we just continue to press for an increase in one and a decrease in the other. Yep.
Um, my other question that I ask very frequently is what are the projects, or I mean, you talk about this stuff a lot and you're doing a lot of work in a lot of different areas. What are the things that you don't get a chance to talk about? Is there something that you're working on that you want to tell us about that you haven't been asked about, that isn't getting enough air?
I think part of that answer comes with the entire context that we've been speaking to over this particular conversation. I think when you talk about complexity, that's just something that needs to be, it's part of the press that needs to keep happening. There needs to be a whole stratosphere of people that are made up of Nunavut, Inuit, uh, and policy people that can just continually advocate, however they possibly can, for these communities in the north. There's so in terms of ideas, I think there's some amazing ideas. There's some incredible people doing some incredible things right across the territory. We were talking about hunters and trappers before. We were talking about the food banks. We're talking about ICFI and distributing, food vouchers and other things. There's some amazing organisations doing some incredible work. The problem is one of the problems is it can feel a little piecemeal because it's a vast problem.
Mm-hmm. Just band-aids.
Yeah.
Blair, I can just listening you speak for the last half an hour. Um, like really, I'm dumbfounded.
Are you
My heart
tired,
breaks.
Blair, or are you energized?
I I think I'm energized. I think I think a lot about hope, and I think a lot about seeing a vision of how things could be if some of the barriers came down, and that might not happen in my tenure in this role. It certainly hasn't happened for those that have gone before me, but you know, I think if you're prepared to hope large and accept small nudges, then you're going to be all right. And you've got to be doing it with other people. Like
Yeah.
this is, it's great, for example, that even this platform exists. I'd not heard of it, but the fact that there's a podcast dedicated to talking about food security is amazing. And I hope you have a wide listenership. And on that note, there's certainly room. I'm very, very interested to talk with other provinces and territories that are working on initiatives. Maybe part of this conversation has triggered something for them, or maybe they've got a really out of the box idea that we haven't come across for some reason.
And also, we would be not only interested in getting some other Indigenous leaders and thinkers, community members that you think would like to participate in a conversation with us, A. And B, I would also like to get from you a list of places where people can make donations and send whatever the requirements are that are obviously community driven. We will put that on our website and on the YouTube channel and whatever so that people can have access, because I think part of the problem in these larger conversations, particularly about what's happening in the north, is that people in Toronto and Saskatoon and I don't know, Vancouver, like, well, what am I going to do? Well, there's lots you can do. There's lots you
Of
can do
course,
on other people's behalf. And we need to provide them with information so that they can access those pipelines. There are resources, obviously. There are, millions of dollars worth of resources that are sitting in places where they would be better served somewhere closer to where you live. So we'd like to facilitate that if we can. So the more information we can disseminate about the work that you're doing and who could benefit from support from where we are, the better it's going to be. So if you would be so kind as to provide us with that information, we will pass that along because people want to help. They want to help.
and the whole country can advocate.
Yep.
That is, I think, the biggest thing is advocate for a change.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
So, Blair, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate you spending time with us and sharing your wisdom and your experience. This will go a long way for we have our viewers across the world and not only just within Canada. And hopefully, our viewers are going to know a little more and learn and maybe look up your poverty reduction strategy and see what you're doing.
Well, and I just think like the information that you gave us today, Blair, is so incredibly humbling and powerful. And I don't think it's a conversation that's being had enough in in outside of the circles that you're in. And I think these are conversations people should be having at the doctor's office in the grocery store, and they should be on the front page of every newspaper. It's unconscionable. Some of the statistics that you mentioned in this podcast, it's unfathomable to me that there are, I mean, obviously, there are people living in places where they don't have access to clean water, housing, food, any of the things that the vast majority of people
Absolutely.
take for granted. So, on behalf of the people for whom you're working so tirelessly, thank you very much for your efforts and the efforts of the people in the community. And I'm sorry that they have to set themselves on fire to get them noticed, but we're we're working to get them a bigger bat.
Well, I really, really appreciate the invite to be here, and I really appreciate the platform that you're creating. And thank you very much for the talk. It's a really difficult subject, and um, it's it's been good to talk out loud to some of these questions.
Yeah. Thank you for
Thank
your
you, Blair.
efforts. Thank you.
Take care.
Take care.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
What a conversation. Um, Honestly, I liked his optimism, and especially in his role, there is not much to do other than being optimist.
I am astonished by the fact that he has any optimism at all, because that's the kind of thing that I mean, I say a problem inside of a problem inside of a problem. Like there are so many problems that I don't even know which one to fix first.
No, but just, and I said this before, I'm going to say this again. Can you imagine 60 to 80% of your community are food insecure
No.
when food is a human right in this country? We are in a developed country.
Yeah. No, I can't. I mean, I just no.
No, and I'm asking you, if your food bill went up by 30% tomorrow, what will happen to you and your family? Would you afford food?
Well, and also, what happens if your car is no longer an option? If you're, I mean, if you have to walk somewhere in minus 60, he said minus 60 degrees sometimes in the wintertime, you had to walk to get food that you can't afford, and that's supposing that you have somewhere to walk to. It's supposing you have somewhere to walk from. It's supposing you could afford it even if you got there.
20 people living in a 3-bedroom house.
Yeah.
20 people.
Yep.
Like,
Yeah.
where are we?
Well, I'll say it again. You know, there has been an enormous amount of wrongdoing done to our Indigenous and First Nations populations in this country for hundreds of years, and it
And it
continues.
continues. That's
Yeah,
the problem.
yeah.
Like,
Don't
we
fool
can go back
yourself.
and change the past.
No.
We really can. But it continues, and that is where my issue is.
Well, and it's not just that. It's you're trying to build a road that you're also driving on. You're trying to drive on a road you're also building. It's the problem is that we're trying to build infrastructure on on in communities where there's been so much damage done. We have done nothing to go back and make any reparations to
No.
the damage. You can't build a building on unstable ground.
No.
So coming in there and
You're
being
right.
like, you know what we're going to do is we're going to build a store and everything's going to be great. Fabulous, except we have to go out and literally dig out, scoop out all of the damage that the settlers, the colonization effectively
Of course.
has you know, laid upon these people. And that's the first thing that we have to do. It's not the last thing. It's just
No,
the
no.
first thing we have to do.
And we are not even talking about mental health piece.
Well,
Can you imagine living in a community where 50%, almost 50% of your neighbors have to choose between food and rent?
yeah, and as I said before, like how does that impact domestic violence? How does that impact alcoholism and addiction issues? You know, mental health issues, declining mental health issues. I mean, all kinds of things that people are doing to soothe themselves in the face of such inequity and oppression. I mean, it's just,
100%.
it's hard. I've said this from the beginning of this podcast, Suman. I mean, it's really hard sometimes to have these conversations because I feel absolutely helpless to help these people. And I'm so angry and I don't know what to do about that. I mean, I donate, I do this podcast,
Which is
I have a background in social justice. I'm doing the things, I'm having the conversations, I'm saying the uncomfortable things in front of people that don't want to hear the uncomfortable things. I'm doing all of that. And it doesn't even
and
feel, it feels like I'm shouting into a void.
but I think it needs to continue, and everybody needs to do that, not just you
I
or
know,
me
but
or a handful.
how do we do that? Like
We
I just want
need
to
our
bang on people's
audience. No, but
doors.
that is it. Our audience needs to have these conversations. We can support nonprofits. We can provide the band-aids, but the main work needs to be a systemic change, and that is where we need to focus on. It is a political will, nothing short of that.
And I love the fact that there are people in this city in Toronto who are having fundraisers all the time and they cost hundreds of thousands of dollars and they're raising money for well-established organizations who maybe don't need a fundraiser this year. Maybe they're fine. And maybe somebody in Nunavut needs a
100%.
fundraiser. Like, how about we do that?
100%. But have these conversations with your elected officials.
Yeah.
Have these conversations because that is important. They need to make the change.
And also, as Blair said, donations are great and they are great and they're required. But this is, again, coming back to this point that I've made time and time again, the difference between aid and development.
Exactly.
We need the aid to get people out of the immediacy, the triage of the problem right now, particularly because we're going into winter. So that's problem number one. Problem number two is aid in and of itself is not sustainable. So we need to create these developmental programs that are community run, right? That are culturally relative, that are tied into government so that something actually gets accomplished, which is a whole other problem. And have it be sustained over a protracted period of time so that then we reintroduce agency and autonomy into all of this.
Absolutely. I still can't fathom the fact that going into Nunavut, it is the highest cost in the world for the distance traveled by flight.
Yeah, I mean, it's cheaper to go to Europe.
It's almost cheaper to go to India.
Can you go
from here
when you go to talk to all the people at the UN? Can you do something about this, please?
I think the first thing is it is in Ottawa.
Fine.
It is Ottawa who needs to start that conversation.
Listen, I live in Ottawa. You just give me an address, man. I will. Don't think for a second I will not show up.
Parliament building. That's where we start. But but that is the reality of it. Ottawa needs to really understand. Our elected officials need to understand that they are part of our country.
Yeah.
They are not separate from Canada. They are a part of Canada. And they need support.
And we have wronged them so egregiously for so long.
And we're still doing it.
Yeah.
And we're still doing it. Yeah. That hasn't changed.
Yeah.
Maybe it looks a little different than what it was before, but we're still doing them wrong.
And I get that there are lots of things that are required to run a G7 country. I understand that. It's not an easy job.
No.
Everybody has a platform and an agenda, and there are special interest groups out the wazoo. I get that. But there are some people that maybe they just need to sit down and shut up for a minute because we got to look over here for 5 hot seconds. Like if we can't,
there needs to be a balance.
Okay, fine. But if we're not looking after our own country,
it's a problem.
How on earth are we supposed to stand there and say we are paragons of goodness and in the world when we're treating our own citizenry like this?
100%. No, I totally agree. And this is not, we just heard from Blair from one community.
I know, but I've been mad about this for a goodly long time.
Overall in all 3 territories, even in our province.
And now I have a microphone, Suman. And that's all your fault.
Can we make sure that this is played in the Parliament building loud?
I can't.
And sent to every member of Parliament?
I can't. There's no possible way that the average politician or somebody, whoever the decision maker is, can sit in a room with the Blair Williams of the world and have them explain to you what's going on and have you do absolutely nothing.
Yeah, and for all our viewers, I say, I know we have decided and we are acting a lot on traveling, especially south of the border. Maybe we should go up north and give them some tourism dollars.
Maybe.
That's an easy start. Like, let's go. It's beautiful. It's gorgeous. Maybe not in the winter, but even in the summer months, it's beautiful space. Let us go and do some
And
tourism there.
and it has to be obviously community led, indigenous led, respectful, like all of the things.
100%.
But there are lots of people that go and volunteer in all kinds of places all over the world. We could go up and volunteer up north. We were gonna
100%.
go to Hawaii as a family, and that for 4 people, 3.5 people. My son's, like this tall,
Yeah.
was $25,000 to go on a vacation in Hawaii at like a
Can you
middle of the road
imagine
place. How about spending $25,000 in
exactly
any of
in
those
our
places and see
communities
what
who
happens?
needs that help?
I'm just saying,
Wow.
like, how about Christmas is coming? Why don't you give everybody a card that said I made a donation in your name to a northern community who really could use the money,
100%.
as an example, because that's certainly what I'm going to be
These
doing.
kind of episodes really breaks my heart.
Yeah,
It
it's
makes us
tough.
frustrating, but as Blair said, there is hope. We
Live in
can
the hope.
hope.
You have to
Yeah,
just
we
live in
have
the
to live
hope.
in the hope.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we can. So, thank you so much for joining. Please subscribe, follow us, the Zero Hunger Project, and we'll be back next week with another episode.
Take care.
Bye.